Welcome to the Pardes channel. Today we explain Exodus chapter 16 in a clear and simple way, step by step. To thoroughly unpack this foundational text, we're going to follow the chapter sequentially through these 6 straightforward sections. All right, let's dive into section 1, context and the complaint. We're starting right at the beginning in verses 1 through 3. So the text anchors us perfectly in time and geography right out of the gate. The whole Israelite community sets out from the springs of Elim, and they enter the wilderness of Sin. This is this vast, completely barren desert wasteland located between Elim and Sinai. And we get an exact timestamp here. It's the 15th day of the second month after coming out of Egypt. Since they left on the 15th of the first month, they've been traveling for exactly 1 full month. And you can probably guess what happens next. The initial supplies they packed and carried out of Egypt, completely gone. Thirst and extreme hunger are really starting to set in, and the harsh reality of the desert is genuinely terrifying. When we look at verse 2, we see the immediate reaction to this brutal environment. In the desert, the whole community just starts grumbling against Moses and Aaron. And notice, this isn't just a couple of isolated individuals complaining. It's a massive collective panic. Think about the sheer weight and stress of an entire nation turning on you. The anxiety is spreading from tent to tent, and the whole assembly is just consumed by this intense vulnerability, and they're directing all that frustration straight at their leaders. Driven by hunger, the Israelites express this desperate and, honestly, incredibly distorted nostalgia for their captivity in Egypt. I mean, listen to verse 3. If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. They are completely romanticizing their past slavery. They actually claim they sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted. It's crazy how fear and hunger have just totally clouded their memory of the brutal bondage they literally just escaped. They're looking at this harsh desert and genuinely convincing themselves that dying as oppressed slaves back in Egypt would have been way better than starving as free people out here in the wilderness. And they straight up accuse Moses and Aaron of plotting to starve the whole assembly. Moving right along into section 2, the heavenly provision, let's look at verses 4 through 12. Now, what's amazing is God doesn't respond to their panic with punishment. He responds with miraculous provision. But he attaches a highly specific test to it. God tells Moses he's literally going to rain down bread from heaven, and he sets up this clear 3-step rule system. First, the bread falls daily. Second, the people are to gather only enough for that specific day. And third, on the 6th day, they have to gather and prepare twice as much. So why the test? Well, this is a vital pedagogical tool. God is systematically shifting their reliance away from their former Egyptian slave masters and retraining them to depend entirely on a providing God. By instituting this daily discipline, he explicitly says in verse 4, "In this way I will test them and see whether they will follow my instructions." During the day, Moses and Aaron relay all this to the Israelites, clarifying the exact timeline of this upcoming miracle. They explain that God absolutely heard their grumbling, which, by the way, was ultimately a complaint against God himself. So they announce a 2-part provision. That evening, they'll know it was the Lord who brought them out of Egypt when he provides meat. Then, the following morning, they're going to see the glory of the Lord when they are filled with bread. And true to his promise, as the sun sets that very evening, this massive, miraculous flock of quail descends. It literally covers the entire camp, providing the exact meat they were so desperately craving. That brings us to section 3, gathering the manna, which covers verses 13 through 21. The text tells us that the next morning, a thick layer of dew surrounds the camp. And when that dew evaporates, a fine, thin, flaky substance is left behind on the desert floor. It looked kind of like delicate frost. The Israelites have obviously never seen anything remotely like this before. Filled with wonder and discovery, they look at it and literally ask each other, "Man, who?" Which translates from Hebrew as, "What is it?" Moses answers them, "It is the bread the Lord has given you to eat." And that exact phrase of astonishment, "Man, who?" is precisely where we get the word manna. Right away, Moses delivers a strict command from God on how to harvest this heavenly food. Every person is to gather exactly 1 omer per head for the people living in their tent. An omer was a standard ancient unit of dry measure. The point here is they couldn't just greedily scoop up as much as they could possibly carry. This precise limit ensured that everyone collected an exact portion based strictly on their actual household needs, completely preventing inequality across the camp. Now, the gathering process itself was full of miraculous constraints. Verse 17 notes that people gathered, some grabbed a lot, some grabbed a little. But when they measured it out by the omer, it magically and perfectly matched their need. Nobody had too much and nobody had too little. But here came the real test of trust. Moses commanded them to keep absolutely none of it until morning. Hoarding was a profound act of distrust in God's daily provision. And of course, human fear kicks in. Some people ignored Moses and hoarded it overnight anyway. The consequence was visceral and disgusting. By morning, the hoarded manna was crawling with writhing maggots and smelled completely rotten, which definitely provoked Moses' anger. Plus, they had to act decisively and gather early, because once that desert sun grew hot, any manna left on the ground just melted away. Let's look at section 4, the first Sabbath. This is verses 22 through 30. Here, God establishes a profound, clear dichotomy in their week. For 6 days, they have a set routine of labor. Wake up, gather the daily portion before it gets hot, and prepare it. But the seventh day? It introduces a totally radical concept for the ancient world. For the very first time, the Israelites are explicitly commanded to observe a day of complete and total rest. It's instituted as a holy Sabbath to the Lord. On this day, absolutely zero gathering is allowed. To make this work, the miracle itself had to shift. On the 6th day, the people went out and gathered twice as much, 2 omers per person. Moses explained they were to bake and boil what they needed and safely save the rest for the Sabbath. Now remember, just a few days earlier, saving manna overnight resulted in a foul stench and a bunch of maggots, right? But on the night of the 6th day, the miracle changes. When they saved it for the 7th day morning, it didn't stink, and there was 0 maggots. It stayed perfectly fresh. And exactly as God promised, when the 7th day arrived, absolutely no manna fell on the ground. Yet, habits of anxiety are super hard to break. Verse 27 tells us that even after seeing all of this, some stubborn individuals still went out on the 7th day searching for food and found absolutely nothing. God issues a sharp rebuke to the people, speaking directly through Moses. How long will you refuse to keep my commands and my instructions? He emphasizes that the double portion on the 6th day is provided exactly because the 7th day is a protected day of rest. He demands they stay in their places and honor it. After this direct confrontation, verse 30 plainly states, "So the people rested on the 7th day." The weekly cycle is now permanently established. Moving to section 5, manna for the generations, verses 31 through 36. First, the text explicitly defines the physical, sensory properties of the manna, so the reader knows exactly what it was like. Verse 31 describes it as being white, resembling a small coriander seed in shape and size. And the taste? The text notes that it tasted like wafers made with honey. So this wasn't just basic survival rations. It was a sweet, pleasant, deeply sustaining food provided directly from heaven. Because this food was so central to their survival and their new understanding of God, Moses commands Aaron to execute a precise procedure to remember it. He's told to take exactly 1 omer of manna, put it into a jar, and place it before the Lord to be kept for future generations. Specifically, it says to place it in front of the testimony, which refers to what will eventually be the Ark of the Covenant housing the tablets of the law. This was to ensure that generations who never walk the desert could witness the physical, tangible proof of God's miraculous provision. Then, the text zooms out to note the staggering duration of this miracle. Just think about the scale of this for a second. 30 days after leaving Egypt, the Israelites were in a collective panic about starving. Yet, verse 35 tells us they were miraculously sustained by this exact daily manna for 40 continuous years. It wasn't just a brief fix. It felt continuously throughout the entire wilderness journey until they finally reached a settled land, right up to the borders of Canaan. Finally, to ensure absolute historical clarity for future readers who might not use the same measuring systems, the chapter closes in verse 36 by technically defining what an omer actually is. It states that an omer is exactly 1/10 of an ephah. This is just a beautiful way to ground this whole miraculous narrative in concrete historical terms. And finally, section 6. Key ideas and lessons. Let's take a quick moment to synthesize the profound practical takeaways from this explainer. First is daily trust. The Israelites had to unlearn their trauma and survival panic and learn to trust God to provide exactly what they needed day by day without hoarding out of fear for tomorrow. Second is the value of rest. By mandating the Sabbath and miraculously providing double on Friday, the text reveals that a weekly pause from our labor is absolutely essential, built into the fabric of a healthy life. And lastly, obedience. God's rules for the manna were incredibly straightforward, showing us that simple, direct obedience to His instructions is really meant for our ultimate well-being and protection. Before we wrap up, ask yourself, In your own life, where are you trying to hoard yesterday's manna instead of trusting for today's provision? Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.